What about supply and demand? Supply and demand makes no sense. I can debunk it in like 2 minutes. Spotting areas where there's either too much of something, supply, or not enough of something, demand. These areas act like magnets, pulling prices towards them. Traders use these spots to predict where prices might change. Supply and demand is an economic principle that outlines the relationship between the availability of a financial asset and its demand. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Okay, a supply zone is where many people wanted to sell, causing prices to fall. A demand zone is where many people wanted to buy, causing prices to rise. To find these zones, you need to identify places where price changed direction in its past, like recognizing patterns. It's how the market behaves. Why does that make no sense? Because if you wanted to sell coin because it hit 176, everyone would have their sell order right here at 176, right? Which, sure, you want to say they have sell orders at high day, sure. But when it goes up there, is there still sell orders there? No. Where did the sell orders get filled? They got filled in here. So when it goes up there, what's actually sitting up there? Buy orders, right? So it's a completely wrong premise because they're saying that because they sold there before, they're going to sell there again. It's like, no, because they sold there before, they're short. And because they're short, their stops are either where they got in or against obvious pivots, such as high a day. So when you get up there, there's buy orders, which is why coin does this. High a day, makes the high again, then guess what? Triggers everyone's stops because their stops 2 pennies above high a day, and then whammo. So supply and demand makes no sense. And the other thing is, if you're a vendor selling fruit, you have one vendor selling the fruit, and he decides the prices. So you walk into the supermarket, you want to buy fruit, apples, they're $1 a piece. Awesome. Now, if 100 people walk in there to buy the fruit, you have one vendor selling the same amount of apples, and therefore prices will go up, or else he's going to sell all of his fruit out in like a half hour, right? In the market, there has to be a buyer and seller for every purchase. So there is an infinite amount of buyers and sellers, or you could say finite, but an extremely large number of buyers and sellers. So it doesn't make sense. And for every buyer, there has to be a seller. So there's never a time where there's more buyers than sellers. Whereas in a supermarket, you could have 1,000 people walk in to buy apples from one guy, right? Where there's more sellers or more buyers than there is sellers. So it's actually impossible for that to be the case in the market because of how transactional markets work as far as the stock market. You have a market maker who provides a bid and an ask to provide liquidity for buyers and sellers to get in and out of positions. So you have one market maker, yes, but they're both a buyer and a seller at the same time. And then everyone else piles in with them. So you got tons of buyers and sellers on both sides of price. So it's not the amount of buyers or sellers. If coin had 1,000,000,000,000,000 billion shares sitting on the bid, it wouldn't go anywhere, even though there's way more buyers than sellers in that market. If there's 5,000 shares on the offer and 1,000,000,000 shares on the bid, it would still go nowhere. What needs to happen is the buyers need to be aggressive and they have to take the offer. Because if they take the offer and cross the spread, they remove liquidity and that causes price to aggregate higher, which we've seen exactly how that works today. Like when a simultaneous break occurs, Qs, XLK semis, they hit the 2260. At that point, the sellers are what? More aggressive. They're hitting the bid. The day in 60 participants take control of the market and they puke, right? And what's happening when that's occurring? They're just clearing out every bid on the lows. Like it hits 500 and then it hits 499.99. Then it hits 498 and they're just clearing it out. Because they're hitting the bid. Market ordering out is what we'd want to think. So it's impossible for supply and demand to work the way that anyone's going to explain it to you like this. What we can say is we don't want to say this is a demand zone and we're going to expect prices to bounce at demand. What we want to say is these sellers, if they fail to take the low of this, these sellers are not that aggressive, which tells us what? If an aggressive buyer steps in like this morning, who's in the losing position? All the sellers, because their stops are against the highs. Supply and demand would say there's supply at these highs, which makes no sense. It's buy orders. So the whole premise is wrong. And what you'll notice is all the supply and demand traders, they're just trading broadening formations the same way we talk about it.